There we go. Welcome and hello. Wonderful to have you with me today. We are working on, today we are going to talk about how Irides change. I would love to know a little bit about you. I always like to know who my audience is. We've got Wilma with us from the Philippines. Maria with us from the Philippines. She's kind of one of my groupies. Love you, Wilma, or Maria. Why do I want to call you Wilma? Love you, Maria. So glad you're with us. And I'd love to know where everybody else is from. Maria Selander and Judy Pottinger, love to know where you're from, as well as, if you're with us on Instagram or in Facebook. It's just fun to see how international we can be with this amazing technology, right? So amazing. When I first started in this business in the early 1980s, like 1980, 81, we didn't have this, right? We didn't have the internet. Well, I think the military had it, but we didn't have it. In fact, I remember when I got my first computer, it would have been about, 1980. I'm trying to think of which child I had in my lap at the time, about 1987. And you couldn't buy these computers just in a store. Oops. Let me just double check. Okay, so Maria is saying, I see nothing on the screen, but I can hear you. Okay, Maria, Maria Wilma Villap, I'm sorry, Maria from the Philippines. What are you seeing now? Because the screen is up. Is anybody else having issues seeing what's on the screen? I see, she was saying, you see it? Okay, great, okay. And I didn't have my camera turned on yet, so that was my fault. Sorry about that. Let me just pop that up and there, so it's not in the middle of things. So as I was saying, when I bought my first computer in 1987, you could not go into a store and just buy a computer off the shelf. So I went to this little shop where this really, really smart guy put together my first computer. And I remember sitting across from him as he was asking me questions to find out what would I do with this. And at the time, a computer, in my opinion, was a glorified word processor, right? We didn't have anything else, didn't know anything else to do with it. And so he asked me, did I want a modem? And I said, well, what's a modem? He said, well, a modem is the thing in the computer that helps you access the internet. And I said, well, what's the internet? And he said, it's this really, it's where everybody shares information. And I went, oh, well, I will never use that. So just give me the slowest modem you've got. Oh, I chuckle because now I am online like 8 hours a day with doing client appointments, teaching classes, doing research, putting programs together. Very funny, very funny. Okay, so let's rock and roll with this. You ready? You ready? All righty. I would love to introduce myself first. Some of you have been with me a lot of times, and some of you are more new to me. My name is Judith Cobb. I got into holistic healing, started getting interested in it when I was a teenager, only I didn't know that's what it was called. I was really interested in nutrition as a teenager. I know, how weird, right? Back then, wheat was good for you. We had wheat and a wheat grinder. I don't know why, because my mother never baked. And so I was the one who learned how to use the wheat grinder, and I started making whole wheat bread from scratch by hand. We didn't have a big stand mixer. I don't even know if they existed for domestic use back then. And that was the beginning of it. I began to realize that, whole food is better than fractured food, that fresh is better than canned and things like that. And I tried to influence my family. I was really interested in midwifery. I really wanted to be a midwife back then. It was totally illegal where I live, but I thought, you know what, maybe I can be a driving force for change with this. Maybe I can help make it get legalized. Then, when I got married, I got more and more interested and was able to study. Over the years, though, I've written many, many books, self-published and self-distributed. Pregnancy Naturally, the Herbal Birth Kit Handbook, Healthy Kids Naturally, the Essential Guide to Nature Sunshine Products, Biokinesiology and Color Therapy Level 1 and Level 2, Confident Nutritionist Dynamic Iridology Textbook, which is the textbook we use in the Dynamic Iridology Assessment System course. I've also created and taught many courses over the years. I've taught a herbology course starting way back in the early 1980s. It was 20 hours of herb training geared for home use. So we were teaching people not how to harvest them and prepare them, but teaching them how to use what they could buy already prepared in a health food store. My students from there, we always had a wait list. We would always fill up and have a wait list. Sometimes we had to add a second night to the class so that we could take the wait list because it was getting too long. Everybody from that class loved it so much that they asked for a more advanced class. So we did a course with 16 hours of how to understand and use commercially available combinations of herbs, how to read the back of the label and understand why the herbs were in there, what they did, and what other things could this blend actually be used for. I also designed and taught Biokinesiology and Color Therapy Level 1 and Level 2. For a few years, I was a certified prenatal educator, kind of inching towards trying to be a midwife. I loved that course. I loved teaching prenatal education. And I still do that kind of one-on-one with my clients now when they're pregnant. I will do private mentoring with them in addition to whatever other prenatal or antenatal classes they're taking. And then, of course, the most recent one over the last 5 or 6 years has been the Dynamic Iridology Assessment System course, which is an IPA-approved iridology course. And I am a proud certified iridologist with IPA and also a proud iridology instructor with them. And that's a rigorous program to become certified as an instructor. If you think being a certified iridologist is a rigorous program, whoa, the instructor program is much more. I'm also a master herbalist, natural nutrition clinical practitioner, and I've got certifications in all of these things, including iridology from lots of different places. So this isn't just a one-trick pony you're talking to here. Want to put in a plug for the next course start date. The next Dynamic Iridology Assessment System course will be starting on February 9th. If you are a health professional, so a herbalist, a nutrition coach, a naturopath, a chiropractor, a medical doctor, an RN, and you want to add iridology to your skill set, or you are looking to learn iridology for the first time, then I've got a really great invitation for you coming up at the end of our time together today. So I invite you to hang on with us to the very end. All righty. Are you ready to, just let me see what's going on with my slides. Okay, just a moment. Let me back up here. As we go through today, I'm going to keep an eye on the question box. And so I'm going to, if you've got questions or comments, regardless of what platform you're with me on, feel free to type in your questions and your comments. When I figured out how to integrate iridology properly into my practice, and when I learned constitutional, because I knew other kinds of iridology before I landed on constitutional, I found that it made it easier and faster to assess my clients. It made me more accurate in understanding what their needs were and what their challenges were. It made our assessment faster, and it also helped me build faster and deeper rapport with my clients. Because iridology teaches us what questions to ask. It gives us an understanding at a level that helps us to have communication, better communication with our clients. And it also eliminates the need for an intake form. I still have all my clients sign a release form, but I do not give them a lengthy questionnaire. And you know what's interesting? I have never had a client complain about not filling in a questionnaire. I've had some who were severely arthritic tell me, I don't think I can fill all this in because my hands hurt, right? And so it really is a beneficial thing. And another thing that I love about doing constitutional iridology, the way I'm going to share it with you today, and the way we're going to talk about it today, is that it helps me to integrate everything I already know. It is not a standalone assessment tool. It helps me to integrate the herbology, the nutrition, the aromatherapy, the flower essences, emotional freedom technique. It helps me to integrate all of my life experience to be able to bless my clients and help them and point them in the right direction. So let's take a quick look now. Well, it won't be a terribly quick look. Let's take a better look, a deeper look at how eyes change. You're going to see on lots of different platforms, people posting pictures that they're saying are before and after images of the eyes, and they're going to attribute the changes in the eyes to fasts or herbal products or things like that they've done. And so we're going to look at this and we're going to talk about this in a very critical way. Now, for those of you who are with us on Instagram, I'm going to move my camera closer. I apologize that that means that the picture is going to be a little wobbly because I'll be holding the camera on my own. So these are pictures that I took of a client's eyes when I was using an 8 megapixel digital camera. 40-year-old man. And I want you to take a really, really close look at these images to see what you see here. Note the color. Note how we've got this dark patch sitting right in here. We've got these dark patches in his right iris. I want you to have a really good look at that, kind of burn it into your mind's eye. You got it? You got it? Because these are his same pictures 18 months later. All right, so what differences do you see? What changes do you see in his Irides? And I'd love it if you would type in your comments here. How does this look different? And I'll show you a side by side. There we go. How does the more recent image, the one that was done 18 months after the image on the left, how do they differ? What are you seeing here that is different? I know it takes a few seconds for the typed messages to come through, but I really want to know what you think is different here. Over this 18 months, we've been working together. This is a fellow who is on and off again his herbal programs. You know, he'll be on them really well for a while and then he falls off them. He stayed on them pretty well for this 18 months. So what do you think has changed here? I want you to look at this really, really critically. What do you think we did to create these changes? I am going to let the cat out of the bag. What we did is we changed the camera. This image was an 8 megapixel with an incandescent ring flash. This is a 24 megapixel with an LED flash. Do you notice the difference in his skin tone? How the image on the left is more brownish, I guess. The image on the right is more pinky purpley. The fact that the lighting was different, different source, different quality, means that the image color is going to be different. A lot of people have said in the past they felt that this fellow must have cleansed. The image on the right is so much bluer, when in fact it had nothing to do with the herbs we were using. Even the detail that we see in these dark patches has nothing to do with the work that he did, has everything to do with the resolution of the camera and the light color and the light source. Does that make sense? Does that make sense for you? If that makes sense, give me a yes in the comments box. So this is one of the reasons that I am really concerned about the way people on social media are posting before and after pictures. And they're saying, oh, I did this cleansing, look at my eyes. But when you look at the images, they were taken with different cameras. They were taken with different lighting. When we do anything and call it a scientific study, a before and after kind of a thing, we have to control the variables. Now, if we had seen, if this image on the right had been taken with the same camera we used for the image on the left, with all the same camera settings. And if we had seen this radical of a change, we would have to explain it that he had done some serious work, blah, 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 right? And he had brought his body into a better balance. But because the technology was so radically different, the output is going to be radically different. And so we can't use this as a before and after comparison. So what would be a better question to ask rather than, do the eyes change? And it's really, what changes can we see in the eyes, and what do those changes mean? Right, that is the important question, because we do know the irides can show changes, or the eyes can show changes. We have to understand what the changes are, what it is that can trigger those changes, and we also have to then understand why they happen. Got it? Yeah, thank you guys for saying yes, and definitely obvious, Bruce. That was wonderful. It's nice to have the interaction. Here is one of the things that changes. Pigment may be acquired or become more dense. Now, pigment accumulates over time in some people, but I've never ever seen pigment disperse. Let's have a look. These are the same eye. Again, we're going to be up front and say different camera. This was my very first iridology camera, taken with a print film. It was an Olympus something or other professional grade camera, and it was taken with print film. It had the left-right switchable flash that you see right here. This was taken with the LED, the 24 megapixel LED. There is one thing that is very obvious here, and notice as well that the intensity of the light can change the pupil size. Okay, so that's an important thing to remember about the tech. What I really want you to notice here is, you see in the image on the right, between 30 minutes and it actually goes all the way up to about 40 minutes, we've got some dark pigment and a little bit of lighter sort of pigment, still a shade of gray up here. And this is the more recent photo. When we look at the older photo that is, easily 20 or 25 years old, we have none of that down here. That pigment is not in this eye. All right, so when we see this, again, we know that the person has accumulated pigment. Now, when we know that someone has accumulated pigment, what it tells us is not that this person was exposed to all kinds of toxicity and we need to do a cleanse. It tells us instead that something genetically has triggered in this body to set this pigment down. When we understand the color of the pigment and the placement of the pigment, we begin to understand what was actually triggered, which organ has been triggered genetically to be going out of balance. And the placement tells us which other organs will be impacted by this. All right, so when he was a much younger man, not much of an issue there. In fact, there's no pigment in there. But some 20 or 25 years later, yeah, there is a little bit of an issue showing up. Now, this is interesting. This fellow is in his mid-60s, and over about the last 10 years, his skin has started to itch tremendously, right? And so what do we know about itching skin? It can be a liver or a kidney symptom. When we look at this pigment and its placement, it's also saying liver, kidney, right? And so we know that that's where we need to be focusing. Now, this fellow's kind of set in his dietary ways. We're having a real problem convincing him to make any major changes that would probably be helpful. He's great with taking his supplements, but I think we need to get some definite dietary work happening with him. And, you know, when we understand the emotion of the organs of the liver and kidney, maybe we've got to do some emotional work with him as well, right? And this is where iridology helps us to draw on everything we know. Let's look at another example. This again was taken with the print film camera. And this was taken when this young man was probably about 12 or 14. He is now about 30. And I want you to look very closely. Let's look at the more recent photo. This is the LED photo. Look at the little pigment we've got here, here. You know, we've got little patches of pigment all the way around here. This one is getting darker as we compare it to here. This one didn't even exist in this eye yet. Looks like, oh, maybe it might, no, that's might be trying to start in there, but it's not there yet, right? We've got these little patches of pigment hugging close to the collarette, maybe starting to creep in over here. We've got this larger pigment sitting at about 37 minutes. It is not in the original photo. So what we know, again, is that as these little freckles of pigment are appearing, things are activating. Things are activating. So again, when we see this for this fellow, it's talking about liver. Now, when we see the pigment coming up in so many places, it's the liver it does over 500 different jobs. It's going to affect everything, right? And so we're not necessarily going to get hung up on all the places where this is sitting, but we are certainly going to get into the fact that liver would probably like some support. Okay, so again, this is not a toxic buildup. This is a genetic programming, just like my hair didn't have any gray in it, 10 or 15 years ago, probably 10 years ago, but it's got a fair amount of gray in it now. That was a genetic trigger, right? We can do things to reduce that. We can do things to slow it down. We can do things to stall it off. But for things like this, we're probably not going to be able to stop it all the way, right? But so we know genetically where we need to be doing support. Oops, I did not mean to do that. There we go. Another change that we see is the Lypemic Diathesis. Now, this is not actually an iris sign. This is a cornea sign. So this is in the cornea itself. And this tells us many things, but typically, we don't see these in younger people, right? We don't, if we see this in someone under the age of 40, we have a very direct conversation with them about liver function, about diet, things like that. If we are seeing a client for the first time and they're over 60 and they don't have this, and a few years later, they're starting to develop it, well, we can have a conversation, but this can just be natural aging of the cornea. The younger the person is when this starts, the more of a conversation we're going to have about what the heck are you doing to your body? And here's what you need to do to change it. Again, just as we don't dissolve pigment out of the eye, we also don't dissolve a lipemic diathesis out of the cornea, right? And so again, when we see this, it tells us some things that may be going on in the chemistry that we are going to need to ask more questions about in order to help this client get back on track and create a program that may help to slow down or halt the development of this marking. Is this all making sense? If this is all making sense to you, just give me a makes sense in the comments box. Makes sense. And if you're with me on Facebook or on Instagram, I'd love it if you'd play with me in the sandbox as well and let me know that this is making sense for you. Another very dynamic indicator. Awesome. This is great. Thanks, webinar people. Love that. Another thing that's very dynamic is the shape of the pupil. The shape of the pupil correlates strongly to spinal alignment. Thank you, Rara Movement. Thank you, and Healthwise and Biromanis. Thank you. I hope I said that right. So when we see a pupil that is not round, when it's got flattened sides to it, we know that there have been long-standing spinal subluxations. So, and we know then that we've got nerve feeds being impacted, right? Because all of the nerves exit the spinal cord between the vertebrae. And if the vertebrae are not properly aligned, those nerve feeds can be affected. This is actually not an inherent sign. This is a dynamic sign. The challenge is that when the spine has been misaligned for so long that the pupil becomes flat like this, it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of time and a lot of focus to get the spine to hold the alignment and to get the pupil to become round again. Right? This isn't one trip to the chiropractor or the osteopath and it's all good and the pupil gets round. This is, no, it's going to take a while, because when the spine has been out of alignment for that long, the vertebrae remodel to accommodate that alignment. That's a part of the reason why alignments often don't hold well. And so this person is going to need to be doing chiro or osteopathy or some other spinal alignment technique frequently. And they're going to need to be doing muscle balancing exercises for their back constantly in order to hold the alignment well, and in order then to let those vertebrae remodel to the new alignment, right? So this is really, really important. A flattened pupil is very dynamic. The person has earned the right to this. They have to earn the right for this to become round, to correct the spinal alignment. Yeah, Rolfing certainly can be helpful with this as well. Absolutely, Bruce, absolutely. We will see blood vessels change in the sclera. So we look at the white of the eye. So what I want you to look at very carefully is, so image was 1997 of this client. And I want you to look up here, just in the upper left of the image, and see what you see. We've got a little bit of this Harry Potter thing happening here. We've got this really prominent blood vessel coming along here. In 2018, different camera, different lighting, but when we do the photos with the LED, we always modify the lighting when we do the sclera images. We can see that this Harry Potter vessel, if you're familiar with Harry Potter and the scar he has on his forehead, this has become much more prominent, but the blood vessel that was coming across down here has become less prominent. So this is giving us dynamic indicators about what is going on in the body. It's giving us specific information about which organ is struggling, which organ has congested circulation or inflammation or various other things going on. So with sclerology and with iridology, you know, I take photos of my clients every 12 to 18 months. With sclerology, I do them at least every 12 months, which means I usually do a full set of most of my clients every 12 months, because I want to monitor pigments that are coming up. I want to monitor, is a Lypemic Diathesis developing? And I want to be watching blood vessels. I want to see how the sclera is changing. I want to look at the color of the sclera. I want to look for different changes in the surface of the sclera. Now, when I first learned iridology, we didn't do before and after pictures. But when we took a picture and we saw something like this, so we saw a lacuna that had these fibers in it, we'd go, oh, look at that. You've got healing lines. This area is healing. This is so good. We had nothing to compare it to previously. So how could we call these healing lines if we didn't know what it was before? Was this area totally open and devoid of anything inside it? Likely not. Likely not. Now, why do I say that? I say that because we know that the stroma of the iris is made up of layers of these little fibers called trabeculae. These make up the structure of the stroma. And so when we have an opening like this in the top layer, we're just simply looking at fibers that are beneath that. That's all. These didn't grow in as a result of doing the right diet or taking the right supplements. They're not going to disappear if this person does the wrong things. This is just the layer that is not the top layer. These fibers that we see are genetically planned. They are here because of genes. They're not here because of taking the right supplements. So when we see something like this opening, this lacuna, and we see these fibers, this is not healing lines. They have always been there. Some people will also say that lacunae, or those petal shapes, change and get smaller. As we look at this, these are 3 images of the same iris. Clearly, the first 2 were one camera and the last one was a different camera. What I'm looking at here is not color. I'm looking at size of the pupil. The fibers that we have in the eye that go from the edge of the eye to the collarette and back out have a given length, right? It's like a piece of yarn. It's like a piece of thread. It is a certain length. When the pupil gets larger, that fiber doesn't get shorter, it gets compressed. And as it gets compressed, it goes wobblier, it goes wavier. It doesn't move, it's just following the contours of the surface of the eye as the iris compresses. When the pupil is the largest it's going to be, those fibers are the most compressed. As we look at lacunae, the same thing happens. Think of this like a balloon, you know, the balloons that people do party animals out of, kind of thing. If you twist that balloon, you haven't changed the volume of the balloon. You've only modified a little bit what it looks like. So as these fibers get compressed, this volume is going to look like it's changed its shape, and has sort of changed its shape, but not really, because as we stretch the fibers out, we're going to see we kept the same volume. We've got the same fiber structure sitting inside this. We're never actually going to dissolve this. This is not going to go away. This is a genetic footprint. This is telling us what genes this person has inherited. Okay, so fibers don't move and pigment does not disperse. And when people get disappointed that their eye color didn't change, that these fibers didn't move, because, oh, I've done all this work, I've gone vegan and I take all these great supplements and I now meditate for, 30 minutes a day or whatever, they get really angry when their eyes don't change. And so they've been misled. The eyes don't change like that. And quite frankly, I don't care if the eyes ever change, because as in look like things are getting better, right? Because what I'm more concerned about is, how does my client feel? Is my client getting results? Is my client feeling better? Are the symptoms they were concerned about coming under control, right? Because we all inherit a genetic range of possibilities. And the question isn't, can you change your genes? The question is, can you maximize the potential of the genetic structure you've got? So we don't do iridology to change the eye color. We do it to assess health. We do it to guide the questions we want to ask our client. And we want to couple what we see in the eye, the answers they give us to the questions, and the symptoms they want help with. We want to join all of that together to help us assess them and to decide on a program, a starting point for a program, and to help us continue to develop programs for them. When their symptoms change and they become, as they're feeling better and big symptoms are going away, they'll become aware of other symptoms that they had been ignoring. We can go back to the very same set of photos, and we can use that same set of photos and analyze the photos with the new set of symptoms and come up with new questions and be directing our client further. Is this making sense? If it is, give me a thumbs up or an oh yeah, something like that in the comments. So now that you've had a taste of iridology, with your permission, I'm going to spend just a couple of minutes introducing you to the dynamic iridology assessment system for health professionals. And again, and everyone's saying, yes, it makes sense. Yes. That's how a teacher always grades themselves. If it's making sense to the clients, if it's landing well, then the teacher knows they've been teaching. if that doesn't land for the students, then the teacher knows they've just messed it up royally. So when we look at the dynamic iridology assessment system for health professionals, this is the only online, live, fully mentored course for nutritionists, herbalists, naturopaths, medical doctors, RNs who want to streamline their clinical work and who want to stop using their own time unpaid to create client programs. It's for people, for professionals, health professionals who want to create programs that their clients can actually stick with. It's for health professionals who want to generate long-term compliance with their clients, long-term retention, right? So many holistic health practitioners and health professionals say that their clients come in for 1 or 2 visits and then they disappear. When we do iridology correctly, it helps us to create the programs for the client in a way that the client wants to keep coming back. So important. I've got clients that have been with me now for 39 years. That doesn't mean I'm seeing them once a month. It means that we work for a few months and then they go off and they work with what we've taught them, and they're good for 4 or 5 years. And then of course the body ages and it shifts, and then they come back in for a few more appointments to get their program tweaked and tuned up. And it's that in and out flow that we constantly have. The next live course start date is February 9th. And if you are a health professional and you want to learn more about the course, you're looking at adding iridology possibly to your skill set, and you're not sure yet if this is exactly the right thing, I invite you to book a call with me. This is that special invitation I was talking about. tinyurl.com/iridology-insight to schedule a conversation with me. Let's talk about the credentials you've already got. Let's talk about the direction you want your business to go in. And let's see if iridology is a good answer for you. Registration is open for the February 9th start date. I limit my classes to no more than 10 students per class because we have a lot of interaction. And if we get more than 10, it's just too big to interact, right? So really believe in a lot of mentoring in the structure of the coursework. This is Sharon Bimrose, a naturopath from Australia. She had already taken iridology as a part of her naturopathy studies. This is what she said. Judith's course, we used to call it Confident Nutritionist, now it's just Dynamic Iridology, surpassed my previous training in structure, content delivery, documentation, and support. Iridology has certainly reduced the time required for prioritizing a treatment plan. It has, without a doubt, been a huge game changer to my practice. And there's the lovely Sharon. Lovely, lovely. So again, I didn't see any questions come in about iridology or about what we were talking about. So hopefully that means I did a good job, right? But I invite you to hop on and book a call if you're a health professional and you want to update your skills perhaps with iridology, or you're interested in investigating iridology as a new skill set to add to what you already know. And with that, we've got one question. Can you identify specific areas of the spine by location of pupil flattening? Like, yes, absolutely. Health-wise, you absolutely can. Absolutely. We have maps and charts of that. So when we see pupil flattening, we know which part of the spine is subluxed. We know which organs are likely being affected and what kinds of symptoms we need to be watching for. Absolutely. Absolutely. Great question. Thanks for asking that, health-wise. All righty. So with that, and Bruce is asking, can I ask a loosely related question about eye health? Bruce, you can ask. I may not have an answer if it's about eye health, but ask away and let's see where we go. Because iridology is not the same as ophthalmology. And so we don't, have I ever heard of Sanaga? No, I have not. No, I have not, Bruce. So yeah, that might be something for me to research, but no, I have not. All righty. So HealthWise says, thank you. It's been so great having you with me today. Thank you so much for being here. And just for those of you who are maybe new to me, we have about 16 different topics we rotate through. And we do them typically Thursday mornings at 11 a.m. Mountain Time, so the same time as we did today. Healthwise says, can you direct me to a chart? Healthwise, I do not know of a chart that is publicly available. Most of the charts for this kind of thing are included in coursework. So I don't know exactly where you would find a pupil flattening chart. Alrighty. So with that, my friends, we will hopefully see you next week. Take care and stay healthy, and we will see you then. Bye for now. For those of you, for those on Instagram, Matthew says, could I do a quick little reading? If you've got good iris photos, we can certainly schedule an appointment.